Thank you. We're now being recorded, everybody. I'm okaying that. This meeting is being held remotely, consistent with the former governor's directives, and we'll follow those basic rules, beginning with a required roll call of HAB members and then staff. And I'll begin with Alex Krieger.
Here.
Pam Goodman.
Here.
Mike Jacobs.
Here.
Steve Hyken.
Here.
Jonathan Klein.
Here.
Bernard Green.
Here.
We are expecting Sean O'Neill. I spoke with her a short while ago, and Carol Gladstone will be unable to attend as HAB members. And staff now, Emily DeHogue.
Here.
Iwana Lindo Smith.
You're on mute.
Yes, here. I'm sorry. I was trying to get to that.
And Sarah Bruton.
Hello.
Hello. And with that, our first agenda item, I think, is a non-event, but Emily, no minutes this time, right?
No, sorry.
No.
Hopefully we'll be meeting once a month again at some point.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Not a problem. Whatever. This is a special meeting anyway.
Could I raise a issue about a question about the minutes?
Sure.
I know this may be controversial, but I have found in other meetings I participate in that AI is a very helpful note taker.
Yeah.
And that it's pretty easy to access. It makes mistakes like humans do, but that it actually simplifies and makes much shorter the time it takes to take the minutes because you have something to start with and correct as opposed to having to start from ground zero. So I think it's a kind of an amazing potential time saver. And I think it's something that the staff for this body, but also more generally the town ought to consider. So I just offer that as a suggestion to lighten the load.
We'll try AI Companion. I sent Pam and Roger what it took in the past, and it was pretty bad, but we'll try it again. Maybe it's improved.
Okay.
Thank you, Jonathan, for the suggestion. And our internal town policies right now don't allow us to use AI, but it's getting fleshed out. So I take your larger comment that less is more and might be faster.
Okay. Well, we have some select board members here, so they got the benefit of hearing this as well. So thank you.
Yes, no. I met with Jonathan earlier today, and we both had our secretaries, our research assistants, do some work for us, and we used AI as those assistants.
I've had the benefit of interacting with Jonathan and seeing how adept he's become at creating an AI end product by treating the counterpart at the other end almost as if they're human and having a chat exchange and molding an end result that has been. I was quite impressed. So it's a good suggestion. Just to add on our staff attendance, David Guzman, I see, has joined us as well, and I'll watch to see if we get additional HAB member. So the main item of business on our agenda tonight has to do with the HAB discussion and anticipated recommendation regarding the town's right of first refusal opportunity at the 16 William Street property. If I might, I'll just quickly go through what I'm anticipating the order of discussion will be here, hopefully fully inclusive. I'm going to just remark for a few minutes on the background, or kind of maybe teeing up the subject. I will then ask for additional comments as they wish from the other three members of what was the RFI review committee that actually has a formal role and has made a recommendation. After that, we will welcome and introduce our representative from Victory Inc. for any further a comment or summary presentation that they may wish to make. Of course, we also have received a lot of written information in our meeting package. We'll follow that by Q&A from in order from HAB members. Then, although this is not a noticed public hearing, I will ask for comment from interested neighbors and others who have voiced concerns or other views about this this property and this proposal. And then finally, after that, we will return to HAB members for an open discussion and an anticipated vote. With that, I'll start with things that certainly most of the HAB members know. 16 William Street is a licensed lodging house serving special needs occupants at the moment by run by the nonprofit Price Center, who have made the decision based on their aging residents in that building to move their clientele and that operation to a single level property in Needham after looking for alternative places in Brookline. Since the town had given a block grant funding to the Price Center for this property 15 years ago in 2010, at that time, the town took back not only a repayment obligation in the event that the programs and affordability covenants were terminated, but also a right of first refusal with specific terms on the property if the Price Center chose to close, relocate, move, etc., which they have notified the town that they were going to do. The main time limited terms of the right of first refusal were an initial 90 days, which the clock began running on the first, I think the 3rd of June. At the end of 90 days, if the town were to exercise the right of first refusal, it would have to have committed documents completed and signed, with another 90 days ending the 1st of December to actually effect a closing consistent with those documents and that commitment. Following this, with the internal discussion and including the HAB and the staff and the select board, and a lot of urging and support from the neighborhood and town meeting members, we began a process of seeking a qualified successor to the Price Center that would acquire 16 William Street and continue under a new set of affordable housing obligations to serve a suitable clientele, given the configuration of the property as a licensed single room occupancy lodging house and the need for affordability. Time was short. The staff did a terrific job putting together a timeline and an RFI, which is effectively a short version of a longer formal document and process known as an RFP, to get serious expressions of information to respondents. We did as much networking as we could through community people and others who are in this type of activity. We got eventually, on a short deadline turnaround, two package responses, one from our local CDC, Brookline CDC, and the other from Boston-based Victory Inc., which is in a specialized form of of housing, a number of different specialized forms of housing for roughly the past 50 years. The designated, the select board have had several meetings on this, and a committee was designated to undertake a formal review and a formal structured rating process according to for the two respondents according to the 4 criteria that were included in the RFI. And those 4 criteria were basically the level of affordability that could be committed to for the 10 single room occupancy. Actually, there's a total of 12 rooms, but a minimum of 50% of the total affordability. So we were looking for the maximum commitment to affordability. On the financial side, the ability to mount enough independent financial resources for the purchase of the property, knowing that the town has with the HAB as the trustees of our municipal affordable housing trust, has resources that could be used in relation to this property, either during acquisition or, as you'll see in the course of this meeting, possible future assistance in funding future upgrades. The Price Center notified us that the basis for the right of first refusal was going to be an offer that they had received from a private developer to raise the property, remove the existing 125-year-old house, and replace it with 2 luxury townhouses. Critical metric was that the price that anything the town would need to come up with through a third-party respondent would be $3 million. The review committee consisted of David Perlman, Vice Chair of the Select Board, who I'm happy to see has joined us for observing and for discussing this evening. Myself as the Chair of the Housing Advisory Board, and the 2 primary staff members. Emily was on vacation for the process, but Kara Bruton and Ioana Lindo Smith rounded out the 4-member person who did the formal review of the 2 proposals. The scoring system, basically, I mentioned on the 4 criteria were, basically 1, 2, and 3, highly qualified, qualified, and then not so. And I guess they use the terms very advantageous, advantageous, and not advantageous. Victory Inc., with their proposal, the 4-member committee rated Victory in the top qualified category on all 4 criteria. BCDC received primarily middle grade ratings, but on the financial aspect was minimally able to provide independent financial contribution towards this acquisition price. Let me take a breath and if I might just then ask first Kara and Ioana, if you wanted to add anything further, including perhaps Kara or Ioana, relative to your due diligence and any references, for example, or any additional information that you came to the table with.
Roger, I'll go. I'll just to maybe over explain, make sure that everybody here understand. I think everybody here on the HAB understands that the recommendation committee, has made those recommendations to the select board. The select board is the one that is authorized to make a decision on whether and how to exercise the right of first refusal or to assign that right. And then I'll just add on a kind of more qualitative level. And first of all, I want to say thank you, Taylor Worley, for being here tonight. If you want to raise your hand, Taylor's here from Victory Programs. And I'm sure can answer any questions that people might have. But we did get very positive references from Victory programs, as well as BCDC, as you can imagine, when someone's giving a reference, or they're good references. So that wasn't surprising. But specific pieces that I'll share with you all publicly about Victory programs specifically, just to kind of round out our introduction to them through people that we trust and through references. Victory programs was described as awesome, top in their field, one of 2 entities that were granted funds from the Department of Public Health because of their new service funding stream of funds that were available, that they're often top ranked for Boston's HUD, which is a federal program, HUD funds for adding housing. Great reputation, especially with services, that they're part of the ecosystem. This was something that was helpful for me to hear. They're part of the ecosystem of all of the affordable housing providers. So for example, Pine Manor, when they're ready to see, you know, where their residents might be able to find the next step of more stable housing, Victory programs is very often makes sense for them to refer some of their specific residents to or in different ways. And Taylor will explain about all of their programs and what they are thinking about doing here in Brookline specifically. That they're a top provider amongst other affordable housing organizations, that they really know what they're doing, and that with regard to grants, they are able to execute and have the organization breadth to make it happen, both at the ground level as well as, you know, the kind of the grant administration and operations as well. So I think I'll stop there, Roger, and happy to join back in.
Thanks for clarifying, Karen, in particular that while the select board may look to the HAB for a policy recommendation, the formalities of this process, as you made clear, are for this the particular committee of 4 making the recommendation, which is directly to the select board, which is the decision maker. So that's helpful. Ioana, did you want to add anything from where you've been sitting? And I know you've seen a lot of the property.
I just want to say one quick thing, Roger. We had reached out we sent emails notifying at least 20 players within the area about this being available, and we only received 2. So it's not that we hadn't tried, we have, and we've reached out, we've advertised it, not in the newspaper because it was you know, we were trying to do this rather quickly, but we had it on our website and we tried to spread the word as best as we could. And we've asked other players to please pass it on to any other nonprofit that might be interested. We only got 2. We did as much as have an open house that they could, anyone who was interested, they were able to go to William Street on July 7th between 10 and 12 o'clock. So that was open so they could take a look at it. However, we still only received 2. So that's whom we had to pick from. And we thought about it and we've spoken about it. And as Kara had said, I don't need to repeat all that. We had to go with the person, you know, the nonprofit that seemed like they would best be able to quickly close this deal, because we're on a timeline and it has to be, we need to get it done.
Thank you, Ioana. David, yes, you're next, and if you please comment. And I must say we've learned a lot from you, and I was happy to see that you were put on the committee by your colleagues, and based on your professional life that gave us a lot of insight into this specialized type of housing that most of us were quite unfamiliar with.
Yes, I just wanted to add that I think that the particular proposal by Victory to have a substance use sober home in our community is actually would be a tremendous asset for Brookline to have. In my professional life, I'm a child welfare attorney, primarily representing parents, sometimes children, in DCF cases where children have been taken into DCF custody. And as part of that work, many of my clients will be referred to sober homes if substance use was the underlying issue that gave rise to the case. And sober homes do an excellent job of really helping parents get back on track, get back on their feet, their lives back together, so they can help reunify with their families. And my understanding, and we'll hear more details of this from Taylor, is that the plan for Victory would be primarily for pregnant women or mothers who are looking to reunify with their families and helping them on their road to maintaining sobriety. A requirement would be that they've already been sober for 6 months by the time that they would be entering Victory. Victory itself, in their application materials, it was very clear that they have the capacity to really hit the ground running. That is a clear advantage to Victory's proposal compared to BCDC. I tremendously respect BCDC. I'm not trying to denigrate them at all. But in terms of capacity and the ability to take this on, Victory clearly has an advantage there. And so I'm very pleased that that appears to be the direction that at least the group of 4 has taken.
Thank you, David. And one thing in the process of learning about this from many sources, including actually, I'll note a Zoom meeting was called that I was able to attend yesterday, called by Kerry Goldberg, who's on today and is in a butter to 16 William Street. The subject and concern about transitional housing and where the journey that the clients of Victory have reached when they enter the Victory's programs, and what the segments of that journey or the stages of the transition are prior to that, from what are sometimes very difficult beginnings of that journey. David, either if you want to comment on that, or if not, then I would ask Taylor to if they can kind of make that clear, that we're in a later segment of that journey and how that relates to where these people that are clients and would be living on William Street have been and have to progress before they can be considered to moving to that property.
Sure. Maybe it would make sense I can back up a little bit before that and introduce
I will.
Victory
So
and Fortis.
you're the next order, Taylor, and as folks can see, I think you're representing Victory as the Chief Operating Officer for what is a fairly large organization. And welcome back.
Thank you.
And we look forward to your continuing educating our HAB members and others present today. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you to the advisory board for bringing us in both on the project as well as inviting us to speak tonight. I'm Taylor Morley. I'm the Chief Operating Officer and General Counsel for Victory Programs. Victory is an organization with 50 years of history, working predominantly in Boston, but we also have a program in Cambridge and previously had one in Topsfield. We work predominantly with clients who are in various stages of their substance use disorder recovery. That can be people very early on, all the way up to people who have been living with sobriety for years, if not decades, in our permanent housing models. The Portis family model, which is what we've proposed to site at 16 Williams, is a very successful model that Victory has operated since 2000. So we have 25 years of history with this program. It is predominantly for families reuniting after gaining 6 months of sobriety, as mentioned earlier. And the critical piece there is gaining that sobriety. For anyone who has worked with individuals experiencing substance use disorder or has had family members with substance use disorder, it takes a lot of work to become sober. It takes even more work to get to that 6-month point. And so for this model, it is predominantly women. In the last 15 years, we've not had any male parents in the program or dual parents in the program, even though it is open to all genders. But it is women who have put the work in to get to this point in their recovery journey. I know after last night's meeting, there were some questions more about statistics. We have some that we can share with this. So our families receive 24/7 kind of wraparound service. That is case management, helping them find permanent housing. It is recovery services, making sure that they receive the support, that they need to maintain their sobriety, as well as family services and helping them connect with the community to find education placements for their children, maintain education placements, even if that means providing transportation across town or a city, as well as kind of helping with the day-to-day of connecting with community, finding employment. And so this model is very, very successful, and it is in part because of that 24/7 staffing. So in the last 2 years, we kind of did our best to comb through the records in preparation for tonight. We've only had one person in the Portis Family Home actually be removed for failure to follow the rules or procedures of the program. We've only had one person within 90 days of exiting the program relapse in their recovery journey. In the last 12 months, to our knowledge, and we've requested the 311 records from Boston to confirm this, we've had no police calls to Portis or related to the Portis families. So it is a highly stable community within the Portis model, and it is people who are dedicated to improving their families' lives and reuniting with their children. There were some questions about what does the kind of child component of this look like? It's mostly infants and toddlers. Occasionally, we do get teenage children in the program, and we work with the families to kind of identify on a case-by-case basis what's best for that support. Finally, in terms of how do people get to Portis? Well, as I mentioned, there's the 6-month sobriety requirement, and we work with our partner at Institute of Health and Recovery to screen clients on a case-by-case basis before they come into the program. So there's been some questions about, would you bar people with prior felonies? And we don't have that blanket prohibition because we work so closely to identify who is the right fit, both for the program in terms of their own journey, but also the safety of the other families, the safety of the surrounding communities. And so if there was at the intake of a family a concern about violence, they are unlikely to get placed in the program. From there, there were some other questions, I believe, about, well, would you be able to support Brookline-only residents? And that's a little bit out of our hands. This is a program funded by the Commonwealth's Department of Public Health, and we are kind of bound by their rules. We're not sure, we're early in this process as well, so we're not sure if we can do a location-based preference for families. But what I can share is, again, this is currently an 8-family program with average stays of around 18 to 24 months. So within that 18 to 24 months, we've actually had 2 families from Brookline in our Jamaica Plain house. So that does represent around 25%, and I know it's 2 out of 8, so 25% maybe sounds a little higher. But 25% of the families in Portis over the last year have been Brookline residents. And that's an expectation moving forward, that case-by-case intake basis. It does matter if your child is attending daycare or school in Brookline. It does matter if your employment is in Brookline. And so that would all factor into evaluating whether or not it was appropriate for a family to move into an expanded Portis model based in Brookline. I am happy to be available throughout this call and answer any questions, but I think that's the 5-minute summary I can give without kind of going on for another 2 hours on it.
Thank you, Taylor. Just in passing, I'll note that HAB member Sean O'Neill has also joined the meeting. One question that was raised for me, and I'll begin, and then have the next thing we'll do is have members have Q&A before taking public input from neighbors and others. The question was, how many people would you normally have per room? Is there a limit? And if you had more than whatever number and you had a qualified household, would they take 2 adjacent rooms, or how would that work, number one? And then related question is, for this property and the total number of rooms that you're looking at, what would you expect to be the sustained total number of people, non-staff people that would be living in the building over time?
So it's a great question. So right now, it's a family of 3 is how we currently structure it in a single room. So if it was a mother with 3 children, they would actually take 2 adjoining rooms as opposed to 1 room. So we do kind of have that mechanism to provide rooms to multiple families. In terms of what the capacity for 16 Williams would be, is we do find that our average family size is in the 2 to 3 range. So with 10 units, we'd average somewhere between 20 to 30 residents at any given time at full capacity.
And you'd normally expect that you'd be normally operating at full capacity?
Yes. So, there is the occasional vacant unit, but the current Portis home is a similar size at 8 SRO units, and that's been at full capacity for the last couple of months.
Thank you, Taylor. Other HAB members, Pam.
I have one, and I, of course, can't find my hand. So I think your organization's to be commended. You come very highly regarded. But I'd like to really have you talk a little bit about how you can best address the concerns of the neighbors regarding violent activity. And I think that is a little legitimate concern that we need to address. So like I assume there's some sort of resident landlord agreement, or I don't know what you call it, but some sort of document that clients sign. And so if you could sort of spend just a minute talking about what are their requirements to stay in the program, and also what specific sort of rules or regulations do you guys have in place that sort of address loitering outside or visitors, or really trying to address some of these concerns that I think are legitimate for neighbors to have?
Of course. So we do, for every program in the Portis family home has one as well. We have both a program agreement that all of our residents sign, or at least the adults, as well as a set of house rules. So there's a couple ways that we maintain kind of the safety and security of the program and surrounding community. First, we control the front door. That's part of why we have 24/7 staff. So if you are coming and going as an adult, you need to sign in and sign out of the building. If you would like to have a visitor, whether that is another parent under a visitation order or just a friend, you have to get approval from the program staff to schedule that visit. And then from there, we have some very kind of common sense protocols. If we see a suspicious package, we talk to the resident about it and may search it. We do rounds throughout the building. Our staff every few hours will walk the building. We also do weekly apartment inspections, both for that, health and safety of our clients, but also to look for suspicious materials. Beyond that, it is a sober facility. You cannot bring alcohol or substances inside. And if you do bring alcohol or substances inside, that is grounds for an escalation. And depending on the severity of it and the frequency of the rules violations, may result in being asked to be removed from the program. As I said, in the last year, we've only had 1 person removed for a rules violation. Generally, our families are abiding by the house rules. In terms of how do we control the sidewalk and around us, we pride ourselves on being community members. If once the program is open, people will have our phone number, they will have the program director's contact information, and we go out and get people at our programs. If a community member says, hey, somebody's loitering and we think they're connected to your program or your resident, our staff will go out to talk to them. And if it is somebody who's connected to our program and they shouldn't be out there and they refuse to leave, we also are not afraid to call the local authorities. We'll call the police and ask for somebody to be escorted away. So we take it very seriously. We do not want to be bad neighbors, and we will go outside of our front door when needed to make sure if anyone is connected to our program is causing an issue, that we're taking ownership of that as best we can.
Do you have any abutters that could sort of provide references?
Yeah, I mean, certainly most of our programs are located in communities. My pause there was quickly thinking on the current Portis
Right,
family
right.
home,
No,
which
I
is
get it.
located
Yeah.
next to a medical institution, but we certainly could look and see if we have abutters at some of our other residential
Yeah,
programs.
that are located in residential communities
Mhm.
similar to Williams Street.
I see Jonathan has his hand raised, and I just briefly interject with a question. I know we talked about it. Are your residents subject to landlord-tenant law? In other words, if you have a rule breaker, do you if they broke the rules of a lease, you could take 6 to 12 months to get them out. Are you able to act quicker than that if you had a serious enough situation?
We are, because it is transitional housing, residents don't have a lease, so it is not the same housing rights as somebody with an apartment. I don't know what the exact time frame would be, because we'd also want to make sure that the family has a landing place outside of the program. But it is not, we don't have to go through housing court in the same way.
Okay, good.
Hi, sorry, I just had a question or two.
Sean, I'm gonna Sean, if I'm gonna call on you in a moment. Jonathan's got his hand up, and then Annabelle Lane from the police department is visiting with us here today too. So I'll call on Annabelle next. Jonathan.
So I first have a point of personal privilege, which is that this meeting is intended to replace a meeting that would normally, before COVID, have happened in person. And if you have a meeting in person, everybody is there and you can see everybody in the meeting. And I noticed that in these meetings, people who attend have the tendency to have their cameras off. So I would request that residents and neighbors and people who have joined our meeting do us the favor of being on camera. You don't have to, just a request, but we would certainly appreciate that. So that's first. Second, I really am looking forward to the comments of the neighbors, and I will reserve any comments I have until after I've heard them, because I do want to hear from neighbors. And third, my one question is about finance, which is that I think you've represented there's a very high hurdle for this property and a $3 million purchase price, and you've represented that you have a in hand or available $2.5 million federal grant, which seems quite fortuitous for this opportunity. And I'm wondering, I know there's been speculation about the federal government pulling back grants and things like that. If you could just give us a little more information about that, since the financial security of being able to perform is an important part of certainly any recommendation I would want to make here.
Absolutely. So we have a two-part kind of traditional housing finance structure here. Is the initial acquisition would actually be through the Property and Casualty Initiative, which is an organization that works to fund affordable housing acquisition projects. The $2.5 million grant we have is a community block grant through Senator Warren's office and HUD. I know there is a lot of uncertainty with federal spending. We share that same hesitancy. But as recently as this morning, we followed up with them with next steps, and when we're given instructions on how to proceed. So we have not had any indication that this money would be rescinded or frozen. Victory also has a few other housing development projects that we've either completed or are working on. And so we also have the ability to pivot in a worst case scenario. If the HUD money didn't become available, we would rely on traditional affordable housing sources to take out the PCI loan.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Annabelle, welcome.
Hi, thank you for inviting me to sit in on this meeting. Just to introduce myself for folks who might not be familiar, my name is Annabelle Lane. I'm a licensed independent clinical social worker in the police department. I've been there for about 7 years. And I just wanted to kind of circle back on the concerns about violence and, kind of rates of crime and those worries that it sounds like the neighborhood residents have. So just to provide a little bit of context, there is some research on this question, and I want to kind of emphasize a lot of the points that Taylor made about the distinction in this population, which is that these are not people who are in active substance use disorder. They are in recovery, and they've done a lot of work on their recovery. So I think there's some sort of data out there around the links between people who are actively using substances and problematic behavior, but the population that's proposed for this site are people who've done a lot of work to, move past that. That takes a ton of commitment, ton of perseverance. So in terms of looking at data and studies, I think it's important to make the distinction between people who are actively using versus people who are in, a significant recovery. There is a little bit of research on recovery type programs and their impact on rates of crime in neighborhoods, particularly rates of violent crimes. And the research, from a study in Baltimore in particular, shows that the effect is similar to convenience stores. So there can be a little bit of a rise, but it's no different than having a convenience store in the area, and it's significantly less than liquor stores, corner stores, and other stores kind of in that category. So I think it's helpful perspective to just think about the Coolidge Corner area in general and, the full range of things that are going on there, and then try to kind of not place too much hypervigilance upon this particular program, given that there's a lot of other factors going on in Coolidge Corner. And I think it's helpful to kind of ground ourselves in that data from, Baltimore, which is a city where things can happen, but they didn't see a heavy increase in crime rates associated with recovery homes. The other piece I wanted to mention is that there is actually, so we don't have, to my knowledge, we don't have a program that's exactly the same model in Brookline. I think it would be an amazing resource for the town to have. I think it would align with Brookline's values. However, we do have a program that is in very close vicinity that's a very similar structure. It's a family program. It's a transitional housing program for families coming out of homelessness. There's a little bit of difference in the specifics of the population, and I don't want to go into too much detail, but it's also a vulnerable population, with a lot of kind of trauma and things like that. The police department has seen no higher rate of calls for this program, which is, like I said, in a very close vicinity. If anything, so my role in the department is to try to support residents who are struggling with mental health issues, substance use issues, who come across the radar of the police department, so who are subject to calls for service from emergency services. From my perspective, having a program where people have the level of support that the Victory Program House would provide is just such a huge benefit. Obviously there's no guarantee that people might not have challenges, they may relapse, but the level of support that's in place in terms of case management, it really makes all the difference in terms of kind of resolving that issue and getting things back on track. There are many, many, many people in Brookline who are having crises related to substance use and mental health who have none of those supports in place. And so I think that's kind of important context to keep in mind as well. People are moving to Brookline all the time. They're moving with different backgrounds. They're moving with challenges. There's no vetting process for them. This is a scenario where there's a very intense vetting process. There's people who are having conversations, who are checking kind of that the families moving in are a good fit, and their families were really trying to kind of set themselves on a path to be able to provide for their children. And so I think it's just important to kind of recognize the program in the context of the greater sort of Brookline community. This is just such a higher level of support and kind of also structure than most people in Brookline have. So there is a structure in place for if things start to kind of get a little bit shaky. That's another thing that most people in Brookline don't have access to, and makes, frankly, my job a lot more challenging if I'm trying to support someone who's maybe getting police calls versus having someone who is in a place where there's already kind of boundaries. They've agreed to those boundaries before they've moved in. All of those things, I think, just sort of set the families in this program up for a really greater chance of success. And the last piece that I just wanted to highlight is kind of returning to what I always think of as values of Brookline. I always think of Brookline as a community that wants to be a place where people of all backgrounds can live, have the chance to enjoy, the beautiful environment that Brookline is, the amazing school system, the amazing amenities that are there, and that Brookline wants to have a community that's open to a diversity of backgrounds and perspectives, and that diversity strengthens and brings value to the Brookline community as a whole. Not to mention what Taylor highlighted about there already being 2 families from Brookline in one of their existing programs. It seems like one of the sort of reservations from the community is that this isn't sort of Brookline resident focused enough, but I would sort of argue that this is something that benefits the community of Brookline, both around specific Brookline community members, but also just by kind of aligning with what I think of as Brookline values.
Thank you, Annabelle. Appreciate that. Now I've got, or have members Mike and Steve have their hands up, but I want to just check in with Sean, who's accessing us by phone, and I think she may have asked to remark. Sean, did you have something previously that you wanted to?
Yes, I just wanted to ask. I am a human rights officer for Vincent, and what we do basically is, do you have like someone to do an inspection to make sure that things are right? Yeah.
Taylor, I think that question was to you. She may not have been on when you talked about the inspections you do of the.
Okay. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah.
It kind of cut out for me there for a second, so I was piecing it together. So yes, we do unit inspections weekly, where staff will go into a residence unit, and they were looking for a variety of things as basic as facilities work orders for repairs, contraband items that shouldn't be in the program, as well as just checking in on kind of like the general cleanliness and organization to make sure things are being kept in a healthy and safe manner. More frequently, we do rounds throughout the day for common area inspections. And, if somebody has their door in, pop your head in and say hello and check on how people are doing.
My other question was, how do you decide if you can really help someone or not? And do you have people leave the program for different reasons?
Yeah, so it very much, and I think a few of my answers are going to sound redundant in this matter. It is case by case. So our staff are going to meet at a referred potential resident prior to them ever moving in. We'll do a tour of a property, sit down, talk through what their goals are, where they are at their recovery, and make that evaluation. Sometimes individuals they aren't a fit for the program, and so we will send them back to Institute for Health and Recovery, not physically send them back, but metaphorically, to help find another placement. And then if people do violate the rules, again, it is not a one and done situation unless it's a very egregious act. But we work with people every step of the way, right? Like we want to intercede before we get to the point of where somebody would be removed from the program. But as I mentioned in my intro, if it gets to that level, yes, unfortunately, people will be removed. And fortunately, that is a very low rate of occurrence. Only one time in the last 2 years has somebody actually had to been taken out of the program for rules violations.
Thank you.
Mike.
I think Steve was before me, so.
Oh, I'm sorry, Steve.
Okay, thanks, Roger. I do have a couple of questions for Taylor, but first I want to say how I think useful it was to hear from Annabelle about the experience that she's had as a social worker within the police department with respect to the other, maybe not identical, but comparable supportive housing SRO programs that we have in Brookline. I know we have a couple, Pine Street Inn and Caritas Communities, and my own personal experience from having been part of the funding of some of those properties, within the HAB is I've heard very little about issues that they have raised in their respective neighborhoods, one of which, as Annabelle said, is pretty close proximity to William Street. Two specific questions for Taylor. Your 24/7 staffing, Taylor, does that mean you have 3 shifts of people who are, spelling one another, throughout the day? No staff member is sleeping there. These are staff who are awake and on duty at all times. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
And I noticed in your description of affordability, you mentioned that at your current Portis house, your residents most of them have incomes equal to or less than 150% of the federal poverty level for a family of 4, which was $48,000 and change. In Brookline, you are saying that your affordability criteria would be what the town considers affordable, which is people, again, a family of 4 that are no more than 80% of Brookline's average median income, which is $132,000. Does that mean that opportunities to enter your program here would be available to families who might not qualify, for instance, for your income limitations in, I guess the other one is in Jamaica Plain? Does this broaden the availability of this type of program for people who don't currently meet the criteria economically?
Yeah, so currently the existing Portis home doesn't have any sort of income requirements. So the data we have is kind of where, practically speaking, most of our residents fall. But you could enter that program with any level of income. Looking at what we proposed for 16 Williams, we're comfortable restricting 100% of the units, knowing that between the 2 sites, if anyone ever did present themselves for the program above 80% AMI, we'd always be able to place them in the JP location.
I see. So it's not there's a restriction, it's just that's what it turns out. Your demographic tends to be in that range.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
That raises a bit of a related question. You mentioned a household of 4, Steve.
I know that they're not talking about households of 4 in general.
Yeah. But the income limits that you anticipate would be applied, Taylor, if your typical household was 2 to 3, would be the 80 AMI as it would apply to the actual 2-person or 3-person household?
Correct. Again, just based on where our families are actually in their earnings, it would be a very kind of rare situation, I think, where a potential Portis client would ever make more than 80% AMI for Brookline. We asked our program staff if that has happened to our knowledge, like if anyone ever had that level of income, and we couldn't find any records over the last couple of years of anyone who'd actually be close to exceeding that.
Yeah, and I'm only thinking in terms of the way we would work out the covenants that would the terms, and it would be the actual size of the household would be the actual income limit that would apply. That's the way all of our other programs work. So, Mike.
So I have a question about other services that you provide. I assume a lot of folks might not be working. So I'm curious about, do you offer any job training or daycare, or what other services do you provide to help folks get on their feet?
Yeah, so Victory itself, we don't do the that level of workforce development, but we do the case management side of it. So we have a lot of community partners, and we'll work on job readiness, either by referring our clients and residents into another organization's workforce development. We will work with them to clean up, issues with a background check that could be barriers to receiving workforce development. So we really approach it as we're acting as the case managers, and we have a very large web of community partners that can help provide the kind of other part of the service model here.
So this home would have, as you said, up to 30 residents, which will be much larger than your Portis residents. Does that require greater staffing than Portis? One question, and 3 people to a room, potentially a family of 3, seems somewhat crowded. So I'm curious, in terms of your design, what are you thinking about room sizes, and how's that going to work?
Code
course.
issue.
So in terms of kind of similarities, the existing Portis is 8 rooms. And so if you took that kind of 3-family dynamic, it would be around 24 clients at full capacity at the existing. So it's a very similar size building. We really think about it as like the existing Portis home is, it's like a house, right? So it is, families have bedrooms, they are free to congregate and have, a television and, other furniture in there, but we set it up as an organization as like, that is where you're sleeping, that is where you're storing your belongings. But we make sure that the kitchen is set up to be a community kitchen, community dining room. The current Portis has both a playroom for younger children as well as a room with bean bags and a video game console for the teenagers. So we take those steps to create community within the program through that shared space, understanding it is a little cramped to have a family in a SRO building. And that's why 16 Williams kind of works so well for Portis as a transitional piece. We are the mid-step in somebody's recovery journey and their housing journey. And the goal is always to find them homes and apartments in the community that are a better fit for a family.
I'm 2 more quick questions. One is, I'm curious about your standards for tenancy. You say relapse doesn't necessarily mean leaving the program. Why not?
So we approach everything case by case, but also we really try to meet people where they are. Holding people that one bad act or, one point in time is enough to derail their journey, is enough to stop providing the services. It's not how we operate our programs. It's not the way our mission embraces our clients. So again, certainly an egregious enough act could warrant more severe action, but we really want to work with people. We want to make sure that we are supporting them and helping them along. And so that's why we don't necessarily adhere to, one instance of relapsing to be kind of a blanket termination of accessing the services in the residence.
What's the experience with if a client has interactions with the law, with police?
So again, it's case by case. A severe
Okay.
enough interaction would certainly warrant removal from the program. Less severe actions, we're going to work with them, and we'll likely work with the courts and/or the local law enforcement to find a solution that holds people accountable, right? Like we don't want anything to be lost in these narratives. Like we work with people so that they maintain their accountability. It is not that they're getting free passes, but part of that accountability is understanding that if we pulled the services out, if we pulled the housing out, we would be destabilizing them and putting both the resident and their families at risk, but potentially the communities by risk by pulling the services away too quickly.
Mm-hmm.
My last question is, are all these households coming from a homeless situation?
So it depends on how you look at homeless. It is unlikely that it would be street-based homeless, but you could have women exiting recovery homes, which are themselves, a short-term transitional component. Sometimes we do get families who are coming and they have permanent housing already, but usually by virtue of being in the transitional program, you're coming from either another transitional program or shelter stay, or it could also just be you're staying with family, friends, or relatives. And doubled up in existing units. And again, it's likely that there's some level of housing insecurity coming into the program, but there's not necessarily a mandate that you have to meet a specific definition of homelessness.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. I'm looking for I see one other raised hand from a non-HAB member, and we will neighbors engage with us and Victory here shortly. But are there any other HAB members that want to ask a question or speak at this point, knowing that we will be having a discussion and a vote after our neighbors and others have expressed their views here? If not, we have one raised hand.
Can I just ask
Yes,
a question?
Renee.
Quick question.
Please,
No.
you're on.
My quick question, because I just may not have caught it, is I'm a neighbor. So is that for later on?
No, we just transitioned. I have members have run their course on their Q&A, and now I'm looking for friends and neighbors to express themselves here.
Okay,
So,
cool.
go
Groovy.
ahead.
I live at Brown House across the street. And so I got a couple questions. There are quite a few people in my building who know nothing about this occurring. So one question I have is, Taylor, when you were talking about rounds inside the building, it'd be like in a hospital. I used to work in a hospital, so hospital rounds. Did you say this also would happen outside the building, or only when necessary would that happen?
So they potentially could happen outside the building. We're kind of early in the capital assessment of the property, so we don't know if there's external security cameras. So if there were cameras that had full coverage on the outside, we may not physically go beyond the threshold in a round. But certainly that's definitely something. If there was a strong desire for the community for us to be checking the sidewalk in front of it, we could definitely do so either through somebody coming on the porch or either maintaining or installing security cameras on the outside of the building.
Okay, yeah. And there, you mentioned something about there would be a number that neighbors could call if something was going down. See, there are benches right against our building on that side of William Street. That's our building. Very, very attractive. Also, we have an open garage with no gate. This has been a concern for me since I've moved into Brown House when it first opened up. So we're talking like some years ago, for security reasons. We have had people transgress onto the property and it party down a little bit. So in conjunction with that, I'm also thinking, the people who you vet will be well vetted, I'm sure, but there's always the friends of the, or family members who are not in the least bit sober or clean, and who kind of pop up. And I know this can happen also, like say in women's shelters. If someone finds out where a women's shelter is, things can get kind of not too good for the women in the house. But so I'm just wondering if this is an issue that you also take into consideration as an organization.
It is. So kind of a two-part response. Practically, yep, we would share the phone number for the front desk to the community. We also encourage people, if you have a concern and you can't reach us on the phone, you are more than welcome to come over and ring the doorbell, and the staff will come out and greet you as well. We also share contact information for the program director as well as our housing leadership if it was a more chronic or serious concern that warranted talking to them. But in terms of like what would happen if somebody was on the bench or coming into the parking area, we take that seriously. And if you call us or you knock on the door, we'll come outside and we'll confirm like that is somebody we know. That's somebody that's not associated with us. Even if it's a friend or a relative of a client, we'll grab that client and we'll ask them, hey, you need to tell them to move on. And if that person won't move on or there's an issue there, I think as I mentioned before, we'll call the appropriate officials, if that's Brookline Police Department or an intervention team. We'll take that step. We don't react passively, I guess is what I'll say to that. Like, we want to be that good neighbor, and we realize that that accountability that we hold for our residents, we hold to ourselves.
That's great. I really appreciate that, hearing that from you. And my last question was, I don't know if you're able to say, but generally speaking, what is 6 months of sobriety? What is the majority, would you say, of time of sobriety of a lot of the people who come and live there?
So that's a great question. In terms of individuals entering the program who have more than 6 months, I'm not sure right off the top of my head, but I can get that information. But in terms, we know the average length of stay is between 18 to 24 months. So at the end of the day, somebody who's completing the Portis program successfully is going to have 24 to 30 months of sobriety at the end of the stay with us.
Okay, yeah, that's because there's also, the difference, of course, well, sobriety as in alcohol and clean as in drugs. And those are two different presenting and community, so to speak, like NA versus AA, very different addictions, very different community. So, and I know from my own life experience and friends that 6 months is that's a good point to start at, but that's a tough spot, even with help. 6 months, it's a lot. And it also, I don't want to say it isn't, but you know what I mean. It's not even getting to a year, and a year can always be very intense when you get to that year spot. It's just so emotionally driven and everything. And so, but I'm sure you all know that. I just want to voice my concerns and knowledge of that. So, and share that with you all. So.
And just to click, when I say sobriety, I do mean sober, clean, however you kind of think of it and keywords you're using. That is across the board for the program. You cannot be actively using alcohol, substances in the program. And then just to add, because I'm not sure if I mentioned the summary, we do have clinical supervision of this program. So there is a licensed clinician who kind of oversees the recovery services. So we're definitely in a position of being able to support people, whether they're on, 6 months to the day or, beyond that.
Good. Thank you, Taylor.
Of course.
Other folks, I know I see some of you that took the trouble to write us in advance, and others who were at the Zoom meeting yesterday. You're more than welcome to, you've got a new audience here. If you want to appear and express yourself, please do so. Marion?
Marion has her hand raised.
Marion, yes, you're muted, Marion. There you go.
Okay, yeah. These families, I understand, are still involved with the Department of Children and Families. I'm wondering if David could talk about DCF's role, the court role, or what's the level of supervision at that level of engagement?
So it does vary, but typically if there's an open care and protection case, the social worker will be required to visit with the parent at least once a month. I'm not sure if Victory has those visits occur on the premises or if that occurs in a DCF office or elsewhere. I'll leave that for Taylor. But DCF social workers do have monthly check-ins with both parents and with children while there is an active case. And also, typically, DCF social workers will ask parents to sign releases of information so that they can communicate directly with the clinical supervisor at a sober home and receive insights about how the parent is doing in terms of compliance with services and conditions of the program.
So do these parents have control of their kids, or is it still in a provisional sense?
Provisional, so that varies as well. So sometimes children have already been reunified with the parents, but the legal case remains open, so there's still oversight. Other times the children are still in foster care. So that often depends on DCF's recommendation as to whether the parent is ready to reunify. And then the question is whether the court case has been dismissed yet.
Yeah, because I just wanted people to understand it. That was my sense, that there's still a lot of outside oversight on these families. The other question I had, again, to clarify, was the Institute for Health and Recovery is making, this is more to Taylor, making the referrals to the program. Can you say what their criteria are when they decide who goes to Victory?
Yeah, it is again case by case and very much dependent on the circumstance. Again, the baseline is it is a parent with 6 months sobriety who has indicated a need for transitional housing, and there's a viable path to reuniting with their families. So in some cases, it may be that kind of happens quickly. Sometimes it may be longer. We've had families where they'll reunite with one child and another child will come in a little later on the program. But really at the end of the day, it's very case by case. So there's not like an enumerated checklist in the sense of when is somebody ready to come into Portis beyond those base requirements of sobriety, having a pathway to reunite with their children, as well as the need for transitional housing.
Taylor, just a little follow on Marion's question she's raising. Is it a given or a condition that the parent who moves in to your Portis property has custody of the child who's moving in with them? Or is it possible they're still contending to recover custody?
So it's hard to say if it's a given, right? Like the part of the screening is that there's a viable pathway to reunite the child with the mother or parent. So it could be in various stages, but it has to be far enough along that it makes sense programmatically. So if somebody was in the very, very early stage of that reuniting process, Portis probably wouldn't be the best fit for them, because it is not something traditionally where you would see like a mother being in the program for 18 months and on the last day of their stay reuniting with their child. It's usually earlier on in that stay. So they need to be farther along in their process for regaining custody.
David.
Just one other detail I'll add there is that oftentimes DCF will provide what's called a 30-day letter indicating that reunification with a child is going to be occurring within 30 days. And many sober homes, I don't know about Victory specifically, will accept that as a sign that reunification is quite viable, given that it's imminent and DCF is already expressing their intention to do so within a 30-day period.
Thank you. I see a yellow hand. It's over Mr. Moran's head, but I know we heard from both of you in your letters. So whichever one or both of you wishes to speak, you're on. You're muted at the moment. You're muted.
Thanks. Mariella Moran here. It seems that the scope was very narrow in your RFI, and that there was little to no transparency as far as neighborhood input or involving the neighborhood. And so I'm a little concerned about that. I'm also a little concerned about the inspection for contraband that would happen every day. That to me seems like it's a red flag. And I think that I speak for myself and my neighbors that we're really not interested in policing the area. And I personally have been a victim of a breaking and entering in my home by a person who was a sober addict. And on that day, he jumped through the window of my dining room. So I really don't want to relive that experience again. And so I know you guys have already made a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, but when will that be presented to the board? Because I think we really need the opportunity to unite as a neighborhood and express our objections there.
Select boards, Mary Ellen, the select board's meeting is August 5th, Tuesday, August the 5th. Bernard, beginning at what time would you expect this item to be likely to be open?
We haven't set up the agenda yet, so it's really hard to say, but and also we're trying to work around the police department's night out program. So we won't know, when it'll likely be taken up until after tomorrow's agenda setting meeting. But my guess is that it will probably be early on in the agenda, clearly before 8 o'clock, I hope.
Okay, I just needed the date. Thanks.
Yeah, and the website, once it's posted, will have a lot of detail.
Okay.
Well, I also had a few comments too. I don't have any questions to Taylor. I spoke to him earlier this morning, and I'm really concerned that there's no line in the sand regarding convicted felons becoming residents. And I've heard, he told me it was a case by case, and he's probably used that. That term's probably been used by Taylor a dozen times in this meeting, and that's a concern. I don't accept the study from one study from Baltimore as being on point in this. It's just, there are statistics out there that, drug addicts, they're present. It increases crime, fire and police, and emergency calls, trash, loitering in neighborhood. These are real concerns. And I don't think they can be just poo-pooed that this is a different type of addiction. It's a different type of facility. The danger is there, and it's a real danger. And the town of Brookline does not have to grant Victory programs this right of first refusal. I understand the town worked very hard and only got two agencies are willing to commit to buying the property. And if that's the case, my view is don't exercise the option to purchase. Let it be sold to a developer to put in whatever he's going to put in a two-unit condominium there. Making a bad choice is not the answer. And once this facility is located there, it's going to be very difficult to remove it. And if there are problems, it's going to be too late. So I know the board has already recommended this program, so I don't believe my comments are going to have any effect. And I've written a letter to the select board, and I don't know if it'll have any effect, but those are my comments. And I think the board should take seriously the neighborhood's concern and opposition, not just concern, opposition to the project. Thank you.
Thank you, both of you. We appreciate it. I see two hands. I think that Sarah Soutlands was up. I see a nod. Okay, Sarah. You're unmuted. You're unmuted.
So yeah, I'm unmuting. I just want to make clear that I am a resident of Brookline. I'm not a butter, but I have spent 6 years running a mother's parent group in Suffolk County Jail. And I have spent 5 years running a online support group for parents with teens with special needs. And in both of those groups, I have heard a lot from mothers who have lost their children to DCF, and I've heard about the efforts in which they've had to get back to them. I've also spent a lot of time with some convicted felons, and I've spent a lot of time with nonviolent, people in jail who've done no violence. And so I'm kind of having a hard time with the picture that people have in their minds of who these women will be. These are women who not only have, and I want to thank David and Kara for their comments. These women are not only women who have worked very hard to become clean for 6 months, There are also women who have probably tried for over a year to get their children back. And to get your children back from DCF custody usually means taking class after class. You have to take a mother and support group. You've got to take an anger management group. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. They have really run through the hoops to get these kids back. Moreover, these are the cream of the crop. They have worked very hard to become sober. They've worked very hard to get their kids back. This is at least their second program in recovery. These are not violent criminals. These are not, homeless, addicted, drug. These are not the people on Mass and Cass. And I feel like that's what people are seeing. And I can tell you that the people who are going to get into this program are not those people. I drive by Mass and Cass once a week when I go to Suffolk County Jail. And believe me, and then I see the women in the jail. And I can tell you that the people who Victory are going to get, I can practically see them in my mind, and they're not violent. They are good parents. They have excellent child rearing skills. What do they miss? Resources. And they've had a lot of trauma. And so there's so much vetting for the Victory programs that all of these images that people have, that's just not going to happen. They don't want to lose their kids. They've tried really hard to get their kids. Some of them probably lost their kids at birth for having drugs in them. So I think that our vision of who the people are, who these residents are going to be, let's remember, these are mothers with young kids who've had a lot of trauma and who've overcome. And I think it's just important that that's what we see.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate that. Carrie, you're arguably the individual with the single greatest neighborhood stakeholder in all of this discussion. So you certainly should and are expressing yourself, and do so now.
Thank you. Well, yes, the members of the Hub, you probably got the very long letter that I already sent. That was kind of a compilation of neighborhood sentiments. And I think, first of all, it's incredibly troubling that neighborhood sentiments are being brought in only now, because clearly, from what you've described, what Kara has described, they were not brought in the rating system, right? Like you had a rating system and you're under terrible time pressure, but no neighbors were brought into that process at all. And what I'm hearing from the neighbors is that we would have put the BCDC application probably higher than the Victory Program's application, because it would be a population of workforce that would be helpful to the area around and wouldn't carry all of the questions and concerns that we're hearing now about the Victory programs. And so, here we are listening to the various concerns, and I want to particularly thank Pam for really echoing the neighbors' concerns. But I'm not going to repeat anything in the letter, but what I heard for the first time tonight is that this house may have up to 30 people in it. Right now it has 10, and it's still blocking our driveway a lot, sometimes noise. I mean, it's like, so this would be tripling possibly the population in this house, which would be hard on us as the only close abutters, I think. And then also I'm hearing talk of like, well, if it's an egregious enough act, then we would expel them from the house. How do you imagine that feels when you live like 10 or 15 feet away from the place where the people might be committing the egregious acts? And I think, Sarah, that was very beautiful description. I'm sure most of these are just very loving mothers, but they're also mothers who lost custody of their children because their behavior was either dangerous or just disordered. And so, and I mean, you know better than I do, but this to kind of downgrade the seriousness of the possibility of problems, I think does not behoove us. And I also have some questions about Annabelle's single study, which is that, you seem like a social worker who has a beautiful heart and really helps a lot of people, but you don't seem objective. Like you seem like I would want to get my own data actually to see what we can really expect, because the general data that's out there is that the link between using drugs, whether you're in recovery or not, and crime is sky high. I mean, it's really like most of the people in prison had drugs or alcohol involved in their convictions. And so I think it's wonderful. Clearly, Victory Programs does amazing work and they really help people. But I just don't feel like the HAB or the town has taken the neighborhood's view at all as you've gone into this process, because the picture now that's emerging is what Taylor called a cramped house with, and as Renee mentioned, like people hanging around, like maybe if they're troubling, then we can call somebody. But imagine if that were moving in right next to you. Would you want that? And also just to David, I mean, also you've done tremendous service to the town, and obviously your day job is tremendous service. But again, I don't feel like you're objective. I think that you, like Annabelle, you're saying, well, this would align with Brookline's values. And I would say, okay, but you pay no cost, whereas we do. So it's like, yeah, Brookline's values, I agree with them, but I also think it would be a very good thing for Brookline to put in low-wage workers into the house next door. And as you saw in my letter, I'm just asking you to try a little harder to try to do something that the neighborhood would want rather than that Brookline as a whole would want. And just one point for Taylor, which is I suspect that you're going to end up coming in here. And as I've said before, we'll be very good, warm neighbors if you do. I think surveillance cameras on the exterior would be very helpful. We would want those. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I do. I want to just clarify that 30 number, again, like that is the highest capacity that we would potentially see. We do have a lot of mothers with individual children. So again, it would be at full capacity, the 20 to 30 range. And just to say, like, we appreciate community feedback. We know these conversations can be difficult to have at times. And so again, like if the community came back and was kind of like, yes, we would like you to install cameras on the front porch to capture it. Like that is the type of stuff absolutely are willing to work with everyone around.
David.
It's been referenced that there's just one study. There are actually multiple studies that show that there's really no correlation between the presence of a sober home and higher crime. So another one is an example. There was one conducted by the NIH looking at 42 sober homes in Portland, Oregon. And it basically found no correlation really across the board in all types of different categories of crimes between the presence of a sober home or not having a sober home. With respect to personal impacts, I live a short walk from Bournewood Hospital, which as many of you know is a mental hospital. The sky hasn't fallen. I feel fine. I haven't had any issues. So I think we want to be very careful about making negative assumptions around stigmatized populations. As Sarah was mentioning, these are not the people who I think many of you might be imagining, who typically are in sober homes at this stage after they've already achieved a minimum of 6 months sobriety. And again, that was a minimum. So it's quite possible that many of them have been sober for quite some time longer. And I expect that would be the case with Victory. In terms of the need, we heard that there are Brookline families who have utilized Victory in Jamaica Plain. And so having one in Brookline would continue to serve a local need that's not currently being met. Also, I do want to add that in terms of what we are able to look at as factors in whether we accept an application or not, those with substance use disorders are protected by the American with Disabilities Act and also by the FHA. So we actually cannot use their substance use disorder as a reason to deny an application. So I just want to make that very clear. There's a legal prohibition on that.
May I respond?
Yes, go ahead, Carrie, please.
Thank you. Right, but you do have a choice. And I think what you're going to hear very consistently from the neighborhood is we prefer the other choice, and you don't have to take it, but I think it would have been good to have that input. And also in terms of, I mean, we live like 10 feet from this house, so it might not be exactly parallel. It means that we would be affected by many things aside from just the existence or possible crime. So thanks.
Looking for other.
I would like to say something, but I can't seem to find the thing to raise my hand.
And it's under reactions. It's
I don't know.
a long time.
Okay, my name's Terry Myers.
Terry,
I'm also a resident of William Street. And one of my concerns, I've forwarded some letters I've written as well. My concern is, again, it seems to be a rush to judgment. I know you've been working behind the scenes on this, but I'm wondering, is it not telling to some extent that you did not get a lot of people respond to your RFP? And that you really only appear to think there's one qualified answer to this? So that's a big red flag to me. And I'm wondering if at all there's the possibility of you walking away from this. I have no problems with Taylor. She's made wonderful presentations. The organization sounds great. The people need help. I understand that. But I think that not enough due diligence in communicating with the residents and looking at other alternatives. Now, I know you're under a deadline and you have this right of first refusal. And what I'm feeling is refuse it and walk away. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry, and thank you for your written message as well. Annabelle.
I actually just had a clarifying question for Taylor. And I apologize if this was covered elsewhere, but how many families would be living in the residence versus how many? Does the 30 include the children? Or I was just curious if you could clarify that.
Yeah, so it would be 10 families. And so the 30 is presumably a mom with 2 children.
Chief Pastor, welcome. If this were in Boston, I don't think we'd have the chief of police joining a meeting such as this. So it's nice to be the town of Brookline. Welcome.
Oh, you just have to invite me. I'm always happy to make as many as I can.
Yes, I know.
I appreciate all of the comments that have been made so far, and I don't want to be too repetitive. I particularly appreciate, I think probably obviously the comments that were made by Annabelle, as well as by Sarah. And just to offer my input, I do have a little bit of I do have a dog in this fight, which is that, my role as chief of police is to keep our crime rates low. Otherwise, you all can fire me. And I don't have concerns about crime rising with Victory House coming in. They have an excellent reputation in the recovery space. I think that having these supports in place, in fact, make our community safer. It allows, women to thrive. It allows us to raise children in an environment that breaks the cycles. And I think it's a win for the greater community. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but obviously, we're here to support everybody that goes into the space. But I don't have concerns about crime, rising to a level, that would be a concern to me and my role as chief of police. So I just wanted to have that out there, and I'm happy to engage in further discussion.
Thank you, Chief Pastor. We appreciate it. We will move to have a member discussion leading to a vote with no authority, but simply a recommendation. Thanks to 2 select board members for listening through this discussion tonight, and for the other 3 when they will receive NAB's message as a result of this evening's meeting. There's no required procedure here, so the floor is open to the HAB members for discussion, or at this stage, it's shortly after 7. I would like to, and we would like to adjourn at 7:30 and leave the last 10 minutes or so for several updates that I think everybody here is going to be interested in from Kara. So HAB members, feel free to express your thoughts, your opinion. And anybody along the way that wishes to move toward a motion, anybody's free to do so. And with that, I'll look for hands raised from HAB members. And thank everybody else for coming and also for speaking up. And I do think and strongly believe that you are being listened to, and seriously, your concerns are not being dismissed out of hand for sure. Jonathan.
Well, I will put something on the floor and make a motion to that the HAB endorse the recommendation of the work of the subcommittee that recommends victory programs to the select board. I will say that I think we have three choices here that have been clearly pointed out. One is to do nothing and allow the right of first refusal to expire, in which case we're going to get, $2, $3, or $3.5 million condominium units on that property. I have heard throughout the town in many different contexts a hue and cry about the prevalence of these teardowns and condominiums, and I think that's a really very bad result for the town in lots of ways. The second choice would be to recommend BCDC. Now, I will say that I came into this with a predilection toward supporting BCDC and their proposal if I could in any way possible. I'm a big fan of BCDC. I think they are working hard to do good work. I think they worked very hard on a proposal here. And I say this as a affordable housing professional. I spent 40 years working professionally as an attorney in this area. The financing for their proposal and the ability of them to successfully raise the financing and close, I think, is really very highly at risk. And I think if we assigned it to them, as much as I love them, I think that their ability to complete the transaction would be very risky, and I understand the committee recognized that. And then finally, I've been really impressed by, I have been listening to what the neighbors have said. I have also listened to Taylor. I appreciate, you're spending the time with us. I've been really very impressed by the background research and due diligence I've done on Victory. It sounds like you have successfully run programs like this in many places over a long period of time. I did just a little bit of quick research on, whether the presence, and looked up that study from NIH about sober homes that was in Oregon, and found no evidence of increased crime, associated with sober homes in that NIH-funded study, which I take a lot of solace from. I can understand that if I lived 15 feet from a building that was going to undergo this kind of change in use, I would have a lot of concerns and questions. So I totally respect that. I will also say that if it was going to be next to me, I would absolutely be in favor of it, because I think this is going to be a good thing for our community, a good thing for the people that get to live there, a good thing for Brookline residents that need these services and won't be able to have them in our community instead of going to Jamaica Plain or somewhere else. And so that's my motion. Thank you.
I second it.
Okay, Pam, you've seconded Jonathan's motion. I'd like to hear from any other HAB members who may wish to express their views before actually voting. Steve?
Muted.
Steve?
You're muted, Steve.
I would just briefly say that I certainly agree with the points that Jonathan made. I think the town was very foresightful in establishing the right of first refusal when town funds went into the previous program there, and to let that go by the boards and again, seeing it from the perspective of the planning board, seeing another potential tear down and $3 million pair of condos erected on that site would be going in the wrong direction from a housing policy and from a community needs perspective. So I fully support this, and very impressed with the length of time that Victory Programs has been running programs like this. And with all due respect to BCDC, they're just not anywhere near as up to a task like this, adding another property to their small portfolio for which they're already struggling. So I think we've got even if it's only a small choice, we have a very good option to pursue here. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Other HAB members present? Mike, yes.
I came in with some concerns and had some concerns that were similar to what was in the letter that Carrie had written. But after the comments by Taylor and several others, felt much more comfortable. I still am concerned about how you have potentially a family of 3 living in one room and hope that the redesign of the project creates rooms large enough that if you're putting potentially 30 people in that house, that there's enough space for them in those bedrooms. It's just a lot of people in there, and I just hope the design recognizes that, gives them enough space so they don't feel like they're living in a motel room. But I think I was impressed with the background of Victory, and I'm prepared to vote for this.
Thank you, Mike. Steve, your hand is still up, but you spoke. Are you wanting to make another remark? No. Okay. Any other? Yes, Alex, please.
I was just wanting to summarize what I heard from in the meeting for myself, that I felt like I heard a lot of strong support with good evidence for the positive aspects of the Victory program. I heard concerns about the Victory program that I didn't feel were well-founded, or were based a lot in like fear, but didn't have a lot of evidence to support. So I feel that the Victory program is a really strong choice to move forward with, as I feel that denying the opportunity denying the option for people to get opportunities where they have good evidence to work positively based on concerns that aren't well-founded would be a chief injustice.
Thank you, Alex. I'm looking to see if there's other HAB member comments. I'm going to wrap up with a couple of thoughts, but want to make sure everybody else is comfortable with where we are so far. Although having had some hesitancy along the way about things that were raised, we'll also be voting to support the committee's recommendation. But a couple of fairly specific things. The suggestion that we could find an alternative, more suitable use, both more suitable for Brookline or for neighbors or for other purposes that have been floated. I don't think we would have to actually deny that something more suitable could ultimately be found if we had a year or so. The reality is it's simply okay to talk about those things, but it's not possible for them to be seriously considered given the facts on the ground. There have been a number of references, including at yesterday's Zoom meeting and in the email exchanges on postings, to mass and CAS. And I think that is it's a horrible fact on the ground in Boston, and it makes one shudder to think of anything even remotely reflective of that in the midst of our treasured Coolidge Corner, JFK Crossing neighborhood. And so one of my sort of challenges or questions was, what is the evidence that that is not what we're talking about? And I'm very much convinced that it is not. And one of the first places that I wanted to see, and Taylor expressed it more specifically today, are what experience has Victory had with their properties, including the Portis comparable model, with episodes that would not be like Mass and Cass, but just be disruptive in the neighborhood. And I think you've heard him reporting their local statistic and their direct experience as being nearly non-existent for anything of the nature of the dysfunction that is conveyed by Mass and Cass. The other, and I'm also a supporter, and have long hoped for the success of what we used to know as BIC, the Brookline Improvement Coalition, and now today the BCDC are now qualified Community Development Corporation, which we've supported financially and otherwise, and they have a couple of properties that have recently been improved and stabilized financially and otherwise. But the two facts on the ground are, one, the financial capacity for something of this nature is simply not there. So it would be unrealistic, even though they've got some experience with other properties. And I also wanted to, lastly, maybe remark and in a way respond to some commentary that again was raised, not without justification in yesterday's Zoom meeting about the town having some behavioral issues that have spilled out into the public area in a couple of other existing lodging houses. We are aware of that. It's not something we would want to replicate at William Street, although it's not something that is anything remotely like Mass and Cass or a crisis. There have been occasional situations that have had to be dealt with in ways that were raised theoretically today. But what's occurred to me, and I'll kind of end with this, that's almost a bit ironic. The Victory program and everything we've learned and know about it, and the inquiry, the diligence we've run, we've heard from Victory and had several public meetings. They are actually more tightly run and less likely to have even the infrequent circumstances that have arisen occasionally in a couple of our lodging houses, and the level of staffing, the level of physical control over the property, the all female clientele, everything points to little or no episodes of the kind that could happen more likely occasionally in a less tightly regulated lodging house. So with that, I'm going to ask for a vote on Jonathan's motion and Pam's seconding, beginning with Alex.
Yes.
And Pam?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Steve?
Steve is always on mute.
Yes. I tried to use my space bar, but it didn't work. But yes.
Well, Bernard's a member of the HAB, as well as what everybody else knows. He's I always call him Mr. Mayor, but he's also the chair of the select board. You can unmute, Bernard, but I think I know what you're going to say.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was on mute. Mayor, at best, I'm 1/5 of the mayor. And I always tell people that that's worse than I've got under the U.S. Constitution.
Well, isn't
those who know the Constitution know what I'm talking about.
Anyway, Bernard, isn't the mayor of Cambridge the chair of the city council?
Yes, but they have a different form of government.
I'm only misusing the word then.
Okay, yeah.
Go ahead.
So, as usual, I will abstain because this matter will be taken up by the select board. But the reason why I do that is because at the select board, we will have a separate discussion and consider additional information, and our votes will be based on sort of the unique responsibilities of the town executive that may differ in some way from the HAB. So that's why I typically abstain. But at this point, I can say that I am inclined to support the motion if it were to appear before or be presented at the select board. This seems to be a very good program. I am a little concerned about the issue that David raised, and that is that people suffering from substance abuse are subject to the Americans with Disabilities Act, among other things. So I just want to be very careful about that issue. But like I said, I abstain, but I'm inclined to support it when it comes before the select board.
Thank you, Bernard. Jonathan?
Yes.
and Sean,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes, and we have unanimous yes with one abstention. Thank you all for your patience and your civility and willingness to exchange some differing perspectives here. It is 7:20 exactly. Kara, we would be interested in hearing briefly about the what you're able to tell us about the status of the current 40Bs projects and where we are in our long flirtation with the magic 10% at the moment. And finally, if there's anything to share with the PEL project eligibility letter out at Chestnut Hill West.
Sure. So again, I'm Kara Bruton, Director of Planning. There are actually 2 active project eligibility letter applications. One is related to the city realty property, otherwise known as Chestnut Hill Office Park, on the west side of Route 9 in Chestnut Hill. And the other is 429 Harvard Street, which many town meeting members and neighbors will know that sounds familiar because that application letter was also, the application for that project eligibility letter was also submitted by the property owner last year about this time. So there's 2 active requests. The select board has already had a public hearing on city realty and will be submitting a letter on Tuesday morning, probably with Bernard's signature on that one. And related to that property, the developer has noted in nodding in understandment that even if the Mass Housing Agency approves that project eligibility letter, which is the first step before anybody can file a comprehensive permit application, that the town will likely be above in a so-called safe harbor, but above a threshold that the state cares about, such that it doesn't make sense for them to file a full comprehensive permit application anytime this year. The reason why they wanted to go ahead and pursue a project eligibility letter is because of their very publicly stated concerns about how long and slow the rezoning of that property is taking with the community. And that's just the way the community process goes. So they want to have that letter from the state in hand, but they don't plan on acting on it at least this calendar year. So it's kind of a, wait and see how that process unfolds more. I would describe the proposal, as I understand it, at 429 Harvard Street as being different. Last summer, when this came to the select board, we had lots of public comment from the neighborhood. We advised the applicant to work with the town, since that property is on Harvard Street and was part of the recent Harvard Street rezoning, to work with the town and consider a 4-story building that meets the zoning we have, which allows multifamily by right in the way that the state wants us to do. So I'm not sure why they are refiling the application letter this summer, other than the call came in about one day after the big press release that City Realty did and landed in all the papers about them filing their project eligibility letter. So we'll see how that unfolds. I don't want to get into too much technical jargon, and I'll just stop and see if there's any questions.
Kara, is two quick things. Are we still susceptible to dropping below the 10 again because one of the things that puts us over is temporary pending a final C of O, or is this the ultimate permanent likely where we're not worrying about losing a C of O again?
So there is no such thing as permanent. And I
know that part, but
I remind this to everybody that asks me the question. We've been below the 10% threshold for a year or two even at this point. What was different last summer is that I had estimated that we were above a different threshold by land rather than by the number of units. So at the point when Chestnut Hill Realty submits their final paperwork and fees related to the certificate of occupancy for Pudding Stone, which is a very large building in South Brookline and kind of a one of the last phases of their project, then the town will be above that 10% unit threshold based on projects that have the certificate of occupancy. So there's not a natural reason for those units to then fall off again. However, when developers decide to convert their project from rental to condo, which is more rare in larger projects, but has happened, for example, at 21 Crown and Shield, and I believe at Bartlett Crescent, for example, then the percentage of units that count on the state threshold basically goes down by 80% or 75%, depending on the financing. So that's a risk. We also have properties that we're tracking, but whose affordability expires over the next several years. And those are largely projects that were done under different grant programs in the 70s and 80s, but they are coming to an end. And then also the existing regulations update kind of the base standard based on the number of year-round household units every decennial census. So 2030 is not all that far away. Yeah. It does usually take 2 years to actually release the census data that the state cares about. So it's more like 2032. But then we have also the fact that the governor has made very clear through two different, through a housing task force and also an unlocking housing report that was done by a group that she appointed, that there is a couple of things that might change in the 40B regulations themselves. One idea that has been floated in those documents is, and I'm forgetting the details, but something like market rate units would fall off a town's or the state's housing inventory after a couple years. So, all of these things mean please don't ever think that there's and please don't keep repeating any language like, oh, we'll be good, or oh, we'll be at a point, because this at least this governor is very clear that they will continue to offer carrots and sticks to create more housing.
So interesting. They might drop market rates off the state's housing inventory. I mean, they're gonna do Brookline's way of counting rather than their way of counting. Yes, and that I meant to close with that point, Roger, and that is that to remind us all that we have our own goal. Never mind what this mishigosh of state sticks and carrots are. That our own goal through the housing production plan, which the select board endorsed, is to have it such that 10% of our year-round housing units are actually deed restricted affordable units at any income level, but income restricted. So that is how we're prioritizing our work with our housing and community development staff, is based on the actual affordable units becoming a higher percentage at all income levels and for all types of people. And for those that may not identify the Harvard Street property by the street number, is that the site, the corner site of the former bank building, or is that something else? It is. That's right. And I failed to say that for 429 Harvard Street, the select board will have that on their agenda at the August 5th meeting as well, and they will be taking public comment. I'll put a link in just a second into the chat here, but on the town's webpage, all of the materials for 429 Harvard Street are up, including the draft letter that the select board drafted last summer before the applicant withdrew their application. People can also submit comments directly to the state. The comment deadline is August 21st. Thanks, Kara. That's a very informative update, very relevant to have and others. Jonathan.
Just a quick question. I appreciate that you answered all my questions but one, which is that in the past you have had a very helpful spreadsheet that sort of tracks this and that you have shared with us. And I'm wondering if, I don't want to create work for you, but if that exists and if you're willing to share it again, I would find it useful to have access to that spreadsheet that shows sort of all the things that are on the inventory, coming on the inventory and potentially going off and things like that. So
yeah, and that's also on the town link, and we've been updating that.
Oh, it's there? Okay, then I apologize. I'll go
No,
find
it's okay. Yep. And I can show that, but I do realize it's 7:30. But anyways, it's I'll put one more link that directly gets there in the meantime.
Thank you so much for that.
Okay, exactly 5:30, 5:31, 7:31. Unless somebody else has a burning need to comment further, I will call the meeting to adjourn, and hopefully we will have shorter meetings going forward into the fall. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.